Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a Yoshino game from around about 2 months ago. So not the newest one, but the reason I saved this particular replay is because it is my best damage in the Yoshino to date. It is overall a ship that I really quite enjoy playing, but I haven't played it that much. And it's really just because it's tier 10 and I don't really find tier 10 gameplay that fun. I mean, it can be, but if I want to just relax and enjoy myself in World of Warships, it tends to be tier 8 and below. I have to be feeling in the mood the right mood to do high tier games. And the other reason is I just have so many ships at this point. I think I've got, what is it, like 250-ish? I mean, it fluctuates a bit with test ships being added and removed. But I'm just not spoilt for choice. I have kept most of the ships for most of the lines I've ever played through. There are some exceptions, you know, there's the odd lines that I've ended up starting playing through from tier 5 or tier 6 as a result of the various kind of winter events and whatever, where they give you the tier 6 of a line as a reward. And with the latest thing they've started doing with the last couple of lines, where you get the kind of preview release and the missions, you don't have to play through the low tier ones necessarily. I mean, the current one, for example, is the Italians, and I think I got the tier 5 and the tier 6 out of the missions. And so for those kind of lines, I don't tend to go back and play the free XP and play the low tier ones, but occasionally I do if I'm curious. But for the most part, like I said, I've just kept a lot of ships, and the ones that I don't keep tend to actually be the exception. They tend to be the ships that I found most frustrating to play. Like the Pan-Asian line, for example. I think I've kept them all from tier 4 to tier 10 I'm at now. Yes, I am at tier 10. Apart from the Shenyang at tier 8, because it's not good. It's not a fun ship to play. It's a ship that I got through as quick as I could, and then just sold without a second thought. That was a bit of a digression, by the way, but I think this is going to be a video full of digressions because, well, it's not the most exciting match. It's me doing what one does in a Yoshino, which is fight at medium to long range and use a lot of HE. But having said that, I think, especially later on in this match, I end up being way too cautious at points. And I had my reasons at the time for doing it, but let's not pretend I'm the world's best World of Warships player, shall we? I occasionally get comments, and you can usually tell it's not a regular to the channel when somebody says, "Oh, that's rubbish," or "You made such and such a mistake here," and it's like, well, yeah, but if you're a regular, you would know that I'm not that good. I somehow lucked my way into having a YouTube channel and people actually somehow enjoying me wittering away over replays of me being a bit derpy, and somehow that's worked. But I'm not going to pretend I'm the world's best warships player. The world's most humble warships player, maybe. I mean, we've established that, obviously. But world's best, maybe not. So this Kremlin, by the way, this Kremlin is going to be a very large factor in why I end up being so cautious. Because, well, it's a Kremlin. It's not to be taken lightly even. And especially when they start getting closer and closer, which is when the guns start becoming scarier and scarier, you can see why I wouldn't want to necessarily get that close. I do, of course, have my torpedoes to work with. But, well, although you can get some fun surprise hits with the torps on this ship. I don't know that I get the opportunity to use them very often, and if nothing else, if you're using the longest range option with the Yoshino torps, then yeah, it can be a bit of a risky proposition in that you might end up with allies sailing into them by mistake. So you have to be a little bit careful with, well, any kind of long-range torps, really. This is also a standard game, so, you know, we've got people... It's a bit of a mess. We've got people pushing everywhere, so again, I do have to be a bit careful with my torps. But I think I've got 12-kilometre torps in this case. I can't remember what that... Is it... I can't remember what captain setup I had for this game now. I would actually have to go and check. Hang on, I'm going to do that. I'm going to check, because it'll be the same captain that I've got in there at the moment, probably. Right, so I think it must just have been one of my Japanese battleship captains with a general survivability setup. Things like fire prevention. So I don't know if I did have any special skills on it particularly, but it was definitely the 12-kilometre torps. I've used the 20-kilometre torps at times, but I think the 12-kilometre torps with the faster speed just, I don't know, they work a little better for me. But of course you do also have the option of torpedo acceleration. You could have a special captain for this, or you might even have a Japanese destroyer captain, although most of the destroyer captain skills wouldn't really fit the Yoshino, I don't think. The biggest difference between the two ranges of torps, though, is the actual torp detection. At least I think it's different. My memory tells me it's different, but I could be wrong. It's always dangerous relying on my memory. So that Kremlin's just creeping ever closer. I don't want to get up in their face. I just don't want to risk it. I mean, I'm down to about, what, 55-60% health already, although I do have plenty of heals left, so that's not that big of an issue right now. There's also the enemy surviving Shima to worry about, because, oh, there we go, there goes the Kremlin. That's very, very nice for me. I can get a bit closer, because as I've said, the maneuverability on this isn't the best, so if you manage to get caught short by a wave of torpedoes coming in, there's not that much chance you'll be able to dodge them unless you get a bit lucky. And even taking just one torpedo is going to be seriously nasty, especially if it's a Shima torp. I can't remember offhand what torp belt protection this has, but it's probably not quite as good as the Yamatos. I'm just going to take that wild guess and assume that I'm probably correct. So as for how things have worked out thus far, well, I haven't done a lot of damage, but as you can see, the assault that's been coming up round the western side of the map is starting to fall apart. I mean, the enemy team is still about 2/3 alive. They've been compressed over onto the far side of their cap, but that means they still have a lot of firepower available. And of the ships that have pressed up, it was only the Gearing and the Zhao that are left. There's also a carrier in play, which of course complicates things for our ships that are trying to remain stealthy, but that's not really so much an issue for me, fortunately. And I do have both the catapult fighter and the defensive on this. I think you get the option of a spotter plane as well. In fact, I'm almost certain you do. So you can get even more range out of it if you want, but again, given how not very manoeuvrable this thing is, and given how long it is as a ship, having the extra little bit of oomph against carrier planes is certainly useful. So this is the point where I probably could have tried to get a little closer, but I think I was still worried about that Shima. There is a big kind of hole in front of me, as it were, between myself and the enemy cap, and given where the gearing is, oh, that was a nice hit, 3 citadels. Given where the gearing is, they're not really in a position to provide spotting, and our carrier is very much focusing on the other flank. So I'm not going to have much warning if Shima torps come in. And speak of the devil, yeah, there they are. The Shima is in fact dropping on me. So maybe my caution was warranted, but you know, if I'd been facing in, then I probably would have been able to get a bit closer and do a bit more damage at this point. We know now, however, where that Shima is. But the bad news, though, is that the Zhao's just died, and there we go, the Gearing has just died as well, so it's now only me on this flank. And this is why I'm kind of thinking I should have been a bit more aggressive, because I've still got a fair amount of health. I've got decent armour. I could have been in there sharing the pain, as it were, with my allies, and instead they were taking the brunt of it. And I was just hanging around at the back here like a big battleship playing jerk that I am. But we still have ships alive. It's not looking that great at the moment, and we really do need to pick up the pace. But because I've been able to kill that Shima, that opens up a lot of possibilities for me. I can now maneuver with much more confidence than I could before. I'm not going to have to worry about trying to make a turn and then suddenly getting caught broadside by a wave of Shimikaze torps, which would have just ended me. One of the advantages of that kind of facing away position, though, is it's not a terrible one. The angles on this ship are good enough that for kiting away, you can still get your front turrets in play, even though, you know, compared to some other ships that have this kind of setup, when you start kiting away, you've only got the rear turret available. It can be very awkward, it can be very limiting, but that's not the case with the Yoshino. It's got quite comfortable turret angles in the scheme of things. So we're closing in on 100k damage. We've actually got a fire going at the moment on that Thunderer, and let's see if I can set some more. Meanwhile, we have a Minotaur which is approaching the middle, and otherwise it is a pair of battleships and our carrier. So we are outnumbered, but we're still in the fight, and several of the enemy ships are looking rather worse for wear as well at this point. So it's not all about the absolute numbers of ships. If you've got a bunch of low health ships that's easy to finish off, providing that you can finish them off, then it becomes not that difficult to even the odds in your favour. But having said that, there is always that risk of a low health ship just getting away, and if they've got a heal, you know, they come back with that bit much more health. It's especially a problem with battleships. Sometimes they do get to just disengage, and there's not a lot you can do about it, and when they reappear, suddenly they've got a bunch more hit points, and that's especially problematic for British battleships. Or, well, I say problematic, it's problematic when you're facing them. If you're playing one, it's a very welcome feature. So that Yoshino is attempting to bow tank. Obviously they don't want to give themselves or give their enemies rather a broadside to shoot at, which is by far when this ship is at its most vulnerable. But that means they're a relatively easy target for me to hit, and in fact I think I was waiting for the full reload there to switch to AP shells. But there's now an island between us, so although this would have been a lovely moment to try and whack some of these, what is it, 310mm? I think this caliber of gun is. Yeah, it would have been a lovely moment to whack some basically battleship caliber AP into the side of that Yoshino, hopefully for some more meaty citadels. Sadly, that chance was denied, and I'm probably not going to get another opportunity. You can see there also me cautioning people in the chat about Yoshino's torps, although I was kind of assuming they'd be using the same torp setup I am, and of course, as I've pointed out, it does also have that 20km torpedo setup. But it's possible to spot them earlier, a lot earlier, just like I think, is it the same 20km torps, the exact same ones that Shima gets? Maybe. So yeah, it's like 1.9 kilometers, or is it even over 1.9? It might be like 2.1 or something. Can't remember offhand. So while the Republic plows forwards and actually does get to kill that Yoshino, they themselves are taking all kinds of damage. We actually lost what was the other battleship? A Kremlin as well. And if the Republic goes down, yep, there's Yoshino torps. That's just going to leave me, the Minotaur, and the carrier. And as it happens, it's not the Yoshino torps that gets them, but yeah, there we go, a fire that the Yoshino actually set. So they get just a flesh wound award out of that. That Minotaur, by the way, yeah, it's a slightly mistimed smoke, isn't it? You can see their intent. They were trying to smoke themselves into the cap and completely misjudged how much laying time they would get. So I kind of need to grab their attention at this point. I can stand up to punishment better than this Minotaur can. I mean, they've got decent AA, but they don't have a defensive. They've got the good heal, but they don't have the armor. And they don't have the ability to set fires, so they're not going to be able to bleed health off these remaining ships like I can. So I absolutely need to put on my big boy shoes at this point. I've spent enough time in this game letting other people be at the forefront and take the hits. Although, it's not like I hadn't taken any damage. I've already got over 1 million potential coming into this phase of the match. Talking of low health ships getting away, by the way, this Minotaur is leading a slightly charmed life at the moment, with myself and the other Minotaur struggling to finish them off. Now Carrier might be able to do it, but they'd have to get through the AA of both the Thunderer and the enemy midway to do it, so it's unlikely their planes would survive that. Their midway, by the way, making absolutely no attempt to get out of the way whatsoever. Possibly they were hoping just to get us killed in time for it not to matter. But no, it just means that even when they're not spotted, we know where they are and we can take blind pot shots at them. We have brought this back in terms of points, by the way, with the kills we've managed and with the disruption of the enemy cap. We've actually pulled ahead, but if people start dying at this point, not that there's a lot left of us to die, of course, it could rapidly go the other way. This is still a bit of a knife edge, but overall we held the momentum in this game, I would say. It's just, it's come down to being a very close match because the enemy team, although they were defensive or on the defensive for most of this match, they defended well enough that it took a really heavy toll on our side. And so we've come down to this finale where it's close, but we're the ones that are on the attack. Sometimes that can end up actually being a losing situation. You get one team that is being defensive, the other team being aggressive, and the aggressive team all suddenly seems to overextend at once and gets themselves smacked. Occasionally it'll be more like, well, people go in one at a time and just die, and then suddenly you're faced with a losing situation. But it really wasn't like that in this particular match, fortunately for us. So there's the Thunderer dead, the HE and the fire damage absolutely doing the job. I've taken more myself, I'm up to now 2 million potential, but still relatively healthy, and that Minotaurs are looking not too bad as well. And our Shikaku, for all that they are pink, they have taken the time to move midway up the map. They will be far enough away to still be safely stealthed up, but that's important because it means that they've been paying attention and that they actually have been, you know, actively taking steps to reduce the round time needed to land their strikes. So we're in the dying seconds of this. This went almost down to the very last second, but not quite. We were within 20 seconds of the end when I got the killing blow, and there we go. We ended that with 188,000 damage done, as well as a Witherer and a Dreadnought. So it was a pretty good match, and as you can see, yeah, 2.7k base XP. The Kremlin, which was one of the last alive, did 2.2. The Hakuryu had 2.2, and the Minotaur with just over 2,000. The Gearing and the Zhao that pressed on the left flank also ended with a pretty decent score, all things considered. So, yeah, that was an enjoyable fight. It really was. And as you can see there, 48,000 from the damage, 88,000 from HE, and 51,000 from AP. So it was a good mix of damage types there. It demonstrates well that although the HE is very powerful and it will give you nice chunks of fire damage, definitely don't neglect the AP. It will sometimes give you really nice results. So that's Yoshino, which costs a bunch of coal. I can't even remember how much coal, but if it's one of the ships you have your eye on as a coal ship, I can definitely recommend it. There are some nice choices these days, and it's one of the nice things I like about this game overall is that there are these ships that are, I mean, I know it's a very free-to-play thing and having multiple currencies, but it's nice that the option is there that you can get these capable ships, that you don't have to reach for your wallet to buy premium ships. Obviously, it helps if you have premium ships to grind out XP and to, you know, grind out credits. But for the purposes of getting coal ships, well, I think the main thing that would help you there is a premium account, which obviously will speed things up a lot for you, especially getting the daily boxes. And honestly, these days, of the daily containers that you can get, probably the best one to go for consistently is the resources ones to get the coal, because coal's a really useful resource in this game. It really is. Anyway, I've ended up wittering at the end of this one as well, so I'll wrap things up now. Hopefully you have enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.